Welcome to episode 80 of the Critical Fools podcast. This week we'll be discussing and reviewing and analyzing the iconic hidden gem 1995 film titled Kids, directed by Larry Clark. It's set in New York, mid 90s. I guess what I'll kick off with is how this movie even got in my radar, and then we'll dive into your probably very fluid and ever expansing thoughts. So I actually didn't even know about this film because definitely it's in the category of hidden gem, because I think unless you're a person who's really into that indie scene, New York style films, you're not going to come across it. So to give you some context, during the pandemic, my team was fully remote. We had a lot of virtual happy hours. Those were dumb, but one of my teammates at the time, he's a native New Yorker, actually one of the few that you meet because most are transplants. And he was telling me how he didn't study computer science in college. He did that later in life, like late 20s. So even though we were kind of same level as engineers career title wise, he was 8-9 years older than myself. But he was talking about his childhood in Manhattan, because he grew up in Manhattan and moving across different neighborhoods. I can't recall which ones, but he mentioned to me have you seen the movie Kids? And I was like, what? No, I haven't seen it. He was just yeah, the movie, obviously it's a movie, it's still embellished, but he was that was how my high school days were, my middle school days were. We would just shoot around, just waste time all day and basically get drunk and fight, And actually this guy's legit fighter. He goes to a fighting gym. And I remember one time he came to work, this was before the pandemic, and he had a black eye, and I was like, what happened? He fall or something? He's like, nah, I'm in a fight gym. And I'm like, of course you are. And he has wild stories too. He got drunk once, and he didn't, he thought it was his Uber. It wasn't his Uber. So these kids came out and fought him, and he just beat the crap out of them, I guess. All he says is he just remembers waking up, and he was like, oh, I wasn't actually bleeding or anything. I was like, yeah, because you probably messed them up, knowing you. But anyways, really smart guy, really hard worker, funny dude, good father, I think, in my opinion, and, good guy actually. But anyway, so I got curious. I look up the film. I'm like, hey, this actually has a lot of actors that I've come across before. I didn't know that they were, there, and we'll maybe get into that in a sec. And then I watched the film, and I'm like, what the heck am I watching? This is what his high school, that he really wanted to recommend this to me. Wow, dude, you must have been a wildcat, dude, back in the day. It actually changed my perception of the guy a little bit. I was like, okay, this guy definitely got an edge. I'm not screwed with him, dude. But anyway, so basically the plot's pretty simple, right? It's 1990s. This is definitely before the era where a lot of education came in around, safe sex, STDs, teenage pregnancy. I think they try to hint on that, because I think now what's funny is that if you look at data now of teenagers today, those rates are drop, right? We have less.
Yeah, other things have happened in the 20 plus years since.
Okay, yeah, but society has changed basically. But this is still an era where, this is
pre-cell phone, so obviously.
Yeah, this is still an era where people are, but also if you think about it, this show also touches on a certain socioeconomic class in New York City, which I found interesting, because obviously I don't even think those affluent kids going to the private schools that cost $30,000 were probably behaving this way. Back even then,
some probably were.
Yeah, partying, but they took care of it if things.
I guarantee a lot of those kids at those elite schools were partaking in the same drug usage.
But I meant more of the unsavory.
The reckless, sure.
Yeah. But anyway, so basically our title two characters are Telly and Casper. What's really interesting before we get into maybe the plot itself is that this film, it shows you how things sometimes just cross each other. This film actually has obviously some actors that we know and would go on to have careers, but there's also former pro skateboarders in this film.
Yeah, I know. I looked that up.
And actually what's interesting is that this is also a period where, because now skateboarding is an Olympic sport, there's a big money, but this is during the period also, coincidentally, when to be a pro, you just need to be sponsored by a small skate shop, and there wasn't really big money. It was you did it because you were passionate.
A few of these kids were sponsored by Supreme. which became a massive brand years
which
later.
became a massive brand. But back then, it was like you got
No, it
peanuts.
was not known at all. But that's
Yeah,
why I was like, holy cow! Some of these dudes were actually like sponsored by Supreme.
yeah,
Like,
and what's
that was a cool connection.
yeah, and what's interesting is that the culture, 90s culture, which is I think romanticized actually in the skate community. I only know this because I listen to a lot of skateboarding podcasts. A lot of people feel like this is what that era is what skateboarding was really about, which was about your crew doing tricks, living and breathing in the if it was New York,
Yeah,
it was
I
New
mean,
York.
it's kind of the same culture of like surfers.
Exactly. And now it's gone too big with money and brands, and like now it's more commercialized and stuff. And
I mean,
look, that's
surfers are the same idea where you'd be with your squad. You got to get the perfect wave, bro.
yeah, exactly.
It's something about those kind of subcultures.
Yeah. So high level plot line is basically we follow mainly those two characters, and they're just degenerates, right? Like they just talk about sex all the time, boozing, partying. I think it
Yeah,
will be interesting to talk about like specific like scenes and like you said, cultural references and like that period of time. But basically the plot's pretty straightforward, where basically these are two reckless guys having a lot of unprotected sex, especially when HIV is becoming more in the public consciousness. And unfortunately, through the plot, we follow our two characters and how they ruin not only other people's lives but their own. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's the backdrop of the context of how I came across this film and why I picked it. But yeah, I'm curious to think about your film's thoughts. Were you surprised that it was such a star-studded? I guess at the time they didn't know star-studded
yeah.
cast.
I
And
mean,
what'd you think of the mid '90s New York?
no. What I will say is like, and I told you this kind of off pod, but it messed me up. Saying I think it was Telly. I was like, where do I know this dude from? And it like took for the first like 20 minutes, it was kind of driving me bonkers. And then like I had to pause and look it up. I was like, holy cow, he was Johnny in the Wire, who like I guess he was typecasted because he played a big druggie in that show too, who ended up ODing in season 3. So yeah, he plays very tragic roles. It seems like I don't know about any of his other roles, but yeah, that was kind of a cool reference for me. But I mean, the film is meant to be jarring, obviously, by the subject matter. It makes you a little uncomfortable. It's borderline like it makes you very uneasy the way they talk, and then like especially the age group you're talking about, like you're viewing them as kids. It's like borderline child pornography at times. Like it made me very uncomfortable seeing like certain scenes.
I mean, that
Uh,
was the controversy. That's why I got the NC-17 rating.
yeah,
Is
obviously I
because
could see why. Like this reminded me of like the '90s version of Cuties in a way, and I have not seen that, but I remember the controversy that drew up over um, the pandemic because it was kind of like about the hypersexualization of like really like people I think even younger than this age group, like elementary to like middle schoolers. But yeah, so it made me uncomfortable at times. One thing that kind of I don't know why I got this vibe, but it kind of struck me. This seemed like a borderline precursor. Like, remember Train Spotting?
yeah,
Felt like how the characters in Train Spotting kind of grew up. Like, or like these kids would end up becoming like the members of Train Spotting down the road because they like kind of indulged in this like hedonistic meaningless of like youthful ignorance. And then later up, they're just going to grow up and continue kind of their destructive ways. Yeah, a la like the characters in Train Spotting. That's kind of what it
yeah.
reminded me of.
That's a good connection. Yeah, yeah. I could see it. Also, it's also a period of time. What I find interesting is that
Which
Trainspotting comes
also
out.
Train Spotting was the '90s too. So
Yeah, it came out a year later, right? And like, it's almost like it was like a for that period a cultural moment of maybe that was the I don't want to say the angst, but like that was kind of like the
it puts
subject
the
matter.
angst and almost like there's no meaning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was also the period where American society, and I think even British society, thought it was the end of history. Yeah, this was it.
Like
This was the
you're gonna have
peak.
2000, the year 2000 with Y2K.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. I saw a documentary on that. That was interesting. I didn't realize there actually was a lot of work done to prevent the disasters, but the luckily it was seamless. Nobody noticed. But yes, going back to your point, yeah, actually I think it'll be worth discussing whether the film actually I guess maybe we'll just segue to that. Do you think the director could have made his points without a lot of those scenes. Because one thing I do read, because I did some reading and listening to the director's side, but also the critics, a lot of critics did feel like it was excessive and like it wasn't maybe necessary. I'm curious what your take is on that. I'll give you the director's side. The director felt like he
I'm
had
gonna be
to.
honest. After watching this, I don't really know what his point strictly was, other than to kind of showcase like the hedonistic lifestyle of like kids from broken homes. That was kind of my takeaway. I didn't really get anything that was a greater meaning from this movie, personally.
Yeah, so the director's take, actually, I'll answer your question because I listened to a couple interviews. He was trying to show American society that your kids are doing this stuff.
Is
If
what?
your kids are doing this stuff, you don't even realize it.
For sure.
And it really made like the generation that are the parents of those kids. So like they would be the people that grew up in the 60s and 70s, like really like taken aback.
I disagree with that to an extent, but go ahead.
But he that was his point. And like he was also just trying to capture, he even says that he was trying to make the film seem not like a film and more like a documentary following the lives of these, like you said, poor, basically lower middle class people who are like on the borderline of food stamps and maybe like in and out of that.
Some of them were definitely on food stamps.
So like in that, like really that range. And
my issue with what he said is there's definitely people who are engaging in a lot of this kind of bad behavior through the hippie movement going forward in the 70s. I mean, you saw that peace, love, drug usage, just free love and all that. They were engaging in some of the same behaviors, and that was more my point.
Yeah, I think what threw off
being grievous, but they weren't innocent people in the 60s and 70s either.
Yeah, I have my own opinion, but what I'll say to be the impartial arbitrator, moderator here is that I suspect for that generation they did it in their like a little bit older.
Well, and there's people who would hitchhike when they're like 18. So not that much.
18, but like we have scenes here with 12-year-olds. Even I was like, this is uncomfortable. Sure. Yeah.
Dude, I was so uncomfortable with the language. I will say the language was just like wild, dude. I was like, Borderline almost didn't finish the movie at like some points.
Yeah, I was like, tough movie. But my opinion is that I actually think it was a bit excessive. I actually think he didn't need. I don't think he needed some of those scenes. I think he could have done it in a totally more R-rated way. And this is where I struggle with sometimes some directors that, they think they're being flamboyant, but then I'm like, you gotta be flamboyant.
It's not for a purpose. It's not for a purpose.
It's just to show that he, I mean, the film is still talked about because
he can do it doesn't make it mean it's necessary.
Exactly. I don't think it was necessary. I think he could have made his points. So here's like juxtaposed. This movie partly inspired, as you know, many artists, like musicians, as I didn't know about the other one. But also, we actually reviewed, coincidentally, I didn't make this connection until after I chose to do this film. The film Mid-90s, we saw that one, right? That was actually, I learned that was heavily inspired by kids.
Which one?
Mid-90s.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought Mid-90s was okay. It touched upon some of that subculture, but like it was done I think in a very tasteful, like I prefer that movie.
I mean, it felt like the West Coast version of it that was a little tamer.
Exactly, and I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was a good film, solid. It's the one by Jonah Hill, and I think this one will probably stick out. Kids will stick out in memory because of its flamboyancy, but I would argue the Mid-90s was a solid film that is also probably going to go down as a little niche classic because it targets a very specific story on a subculture and in an environment that most people don't want to make a movie about, right? Like who really wants to make a movie about teenagers who just do nothing and skateboard and
and they're terrible people, dude. Like they didn't even care about anyone else they affected.
That's the difference. Mid-90s, the kids actually cared about each other.
Well, they had their community, and that's kind of what it was about, is showing the community kind of rallying together with them. In the Mid-90s, it was just awful behavior. I mean,
No,
before,
other way. Mid '90s was.
I'm sorry.
Community.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Kids was
Yeah.
just terror, people behaving awfully.
So yeah, let's get into the title character. What do you think of our boy Telly, dude?
I think he's just someone who just had no direction and guidance. You think you kind of know everything and you try to be cool. And he just didn't care who he was really hurting.
He just wanted to bang girls, dude.
Yeah, but oh, dude, the language was just like he was making me so uncomfortable. Like how he was like, I get it. Like you're youthful and you kind of like mature. I was like, I don't know if I knew anyone who was that extreme. Like that was wild. Like some of the other comments you would make.
The one critic that I did like, I agreed with him. He actually had a good point. He said like even for the 1995, how many 17-year-olds really talked like Telly?
No one talked to that extreme.
And that was a good critique. I was like, is this a teenager or is this the director masking as a teenager?
What was the absolute worst or most extreme person?
Yeah, it's like the screenwriter and the director. I think they were using a teenager.
Like, are there people out there who might have been talking? Sure, that definitely wasn't the majority. There's no way.
Exactly. But anyways,
and if you're trying to capture a moment, that's not it.
Yeah. So basically, if we go back to the plot line, right? Like basically, the teenagers they steal stuff from a store, out boozing. They love talking about sex all the time, and I won't repeat the language, but let's just say underage, untarnished girls. I'll use that word. And but anyways, what did you think of the female perspective of this film? So like obviously there's like, to me, actually gender plays a role here, right? We got a lot of the male perspective of at least these characters, right? They want to bang, they want to have fun, they want to booze, they fight.
You seen the dudes, and then you talk from the chick side, because there are some scenes that was an interesting part where they're contrasting the dudes talking and just the females talking about their experiences and what they want from like the opposite side.
Yeah. But so what was your take on
the language was still like a lot. It was a lot, bro. What it reminded me of is kind of what you were talking about when we were in high school, and you had a conversation before even the teacher popped in, and some of the females we were talking about their kind of routines regarding sex, and you got very uncomfortable.
I don't remember.
You're like, this is huh?
I don't remember this, but I feel like that sounds like me. Like I would have.
It was like, I don't know what class it was, but some people were talking. The teachers showed in, but they were all talking about like the birth control and other things that they were doing and who they were dating. And you're like, you're like, chill.
Yeah, this was Spanish. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I was like, I don't even know this shit. I'm good, bro. I'm good, dude.
You're like, chill. Talk
pull
about
out
this
game,
later.
bro. Pull out game. That's what I believe in, dude.
Well, I can tell you're like, chill. Why are you talking about this right now?
That's all. It's true. Nobody's having sex in this class right now. So I don't know why they're talking about it. But they were just comparing notes. Like, oh, I gained weight. Like, you got to be careful. Maybe half a pill. It's like, what the?
Oh, yeah. Some of the side effects of birth control. Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm all about natural. So let's go. Let's go. Sorry, man. Hey. Hey, NC-17 episode. So we can say, I can say what I want.
Where's your flagrant shirt, dude?
I have a sweatshirt, not a shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
But 100%, dude. I'm all about that. Like
anyway, yeah, but it's I forgot exactly what we were talking about. It's interesting, but yeah, the language was just like so over the top. It was like the most extreme version of what people talk about.
No, we were. The topic was just like you said, different.
The females.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too because you see that like.
What I meant by interesting was just the direction or the contrast.
Yes, huge contrast. And what's funny is that in that scene where the girls are talking in their room, I mean, like they're all like,
dude, they're young, dude. It was like, dude, the age is what made me so uncomfortable watching this.
Yeah, and then they, two of the so it's actually we have I mean there's a lot of characters, but the two main characters on one side is like right Telly Casper, and the other two are the two female friends, right? What's her name? I can't remember. I'm gonna look it up. Real quick. Ruby and
Jenny.
Yeah, and so they go to the doctor, right? And it's funny how like they also cross-juxpose how like one is like Let's just say
Very
she likes.
promiscuous, and then one had one encounter and had an STD.
Yeah, the problem is that her one encounter was Telly. That was her problem, dude. Because she was shocked, which I understand too. Like if you
You're
know,
like, oh, it was one time. Yeah, but
yeah,
it only takes one time.
yeah, especially with Telly, who's doing like 80 times probably. One thing I didn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I'm biased. I just had a hard time believing that Telly would be getting with so many girls. I guess maybe they're naive and they're like they don't know any better.
And you met people who are sweet talkers.
Is he though? I didn't find him that charismatic.
I'm not saying he was, but like, I think he was supposed to represent like kind of that archetype of dude.
Yeah, I guess. But he was really a druggie / alcoholic. Yeah. Anyway, so he's always looking for his next conquest. He gets a bunch. What did you?
I mean, I guess like, so how did you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about sequence or just the characters themselves?
I think here the characters, because the plot's like simple. In the end, like
it's
the other
simple, like there's like obviously like we know what happens. There's like I would say for like Casper and Telly, they were just both very misguided. It didn't really seem like they had any like good male figures in their lives. And they were just kind of led by kind of youthful nihilistic hedonism.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's something that the film does show well, right? Like he has the interaction with his mom, and his mom is like totally preoccupied, is not on top of him at all.
Well, I would say this is just a case of like absentee parenting in a way.
Exactly. So I think that was a topic of this film. Oh, by the way, little nugget. So where they do the fight scene, the skateboarders are beating him up. So that part,
parenting is not a word. Parenting. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that where they have that, they beat up the skateboarders.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a little New York nugget for people. Yesterday, I was just playing basketball in that park. Yeah, it's a very well known, famous park. Where they filmed that scene, Tompkins Square. So this is, if you don't recall, this is the scene where the skateboarders beat up the guy in the park, and they're just like beating it, they're just smashing him. It's actually a really well known and popular park that has been part of I think New York culture for like decades now. And actually it has a skate park section, but it's actually not officially a skate park. It's just been there so long that the city has never kicked them out. They want to, but I don't think it's going to happen. But right behind them is basketball courts that people play pickup and stuff. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, I play in the side court because I'm not that good, but you can see the good players play it. But no, it was just a little nugget there. But yeah, I think here makes sense to do characters, and then the last probably scene maybe talk about in detail. So,
what did you? Telly's. The two best friends are kind of the same.
Yeah.
The group.
But Casper is a bit different. I feel like he's a bit insecure. That was my sense of him. But he felt like he wasn't getting enough action.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he was as charismatic as Telly. At least I think that's how the film was supposed to portray it.
What did you think of like how they dressed? It was like I had a little throwback to like, oh, that's how it
was. Very 90s.
Yeah, very 90s.
Super 90s kind of culture.
Yeah, baggy everything,
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in that era. We were like kids with everyone with baggy and tall tees. AI was wearing his shorts down and his gosh damn calves. So yeah, I remember that era very well.
So actually, it's a little side topic because going back to what I said in the beginning with my coworker. So he picked the mid-90s as the teenage movie that represented his youth. I'm actually curious, what would be your if somebody asked you what's your teenage movie that represented your era of like being a teenager, middle schooler, what would you pick? I have mine.
Movie?
Yeah. If you were just asked by a kid that's like 15, like what represented your like typical high school, middle school experience, what would be hopefully it's not.
I have no idea. I'd have to think about that.
I have my pick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine's always going to be super bad. But I feel like that kind of represented like we weren't like
kind of.
That was me in high school, dude. Goofy, funny, but not like super like. Yeah, okay. Definitely not killing people or like
I think we're having a little revisionist history here.
What do you mean? What do you mean revisionist history,
Oh.
dude?
I'll leave it at that.
They're all nerdy dudes. That's what I was like, dude. So
Mm,
I
fair
didn't
enough.
pick like Blue Mountain State, bro. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of like those kind of films are a little too stereotypical or cliche.
yeah. Well, I love cliches, so that fits perfectly. Anyways, so I think I don't know if there's any bigger topics as we talked about the drug abuse. We debated if the director was too excessive. That was one thing I wanted to talk to you about. I guess we could talk about the final sequence. I think that's probably the only part in the movie we should probably do the sequence, right? Yeah.
Hey, you want to hear something funny? So I was just looking at the wiki. Apparently, Telly was nominated by the American Film Institute. He was nominated as one of the top 100 villains in film history.
He is a villain, dude. Yeah,
That kind of cracked me up, though.
To give our audience context, we follow these, let's say, 4 characters, right? We get the girl perspective, the boy perspective, and basically, Telly's trying to get into the pants of this young Latina girl, and
Ruby, right?
Yeah. No, I think Ruby is Rosario Dawson's character. She's just like it was the other one.
Darcy.
Darcy, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the person who got HIV from Telly is trying to stop that. So that's kind of like the conflict, which I found kind of like not that great. I thought that was a weaker point of the film's like, okay, like that's a good sentiment, but like, come on. Anyways, so unfortunately, Telly gets his way. He's banging this girl, and it's that's definitely a scene. I won't really go through the details of that scene, but let's just say it's very explicit and in your face. And she, I forgot the blonde girl's name, but she, it's not Ruby, it's Jenny. Jenny's like distraught, and so previously she was at some party, she got drugged, she's effed up. Oh, I have one other scene to talk about. And basically Casper rapes her. Actually, not basically. He does rape her, and then he gets
not basically. I will admit I fast forwarded through that very quickly.
I will say that last sequence. This is why probably the film still sticks with people's minds. I was like, yeah, that's not really like this is a lot to take because it's back to back. It's back to back.
Everything about that ending sequence too much.
And then he because Casper, as I alluded earlier, is insecure. He wants his dues. He sees all these. I think what really pissed him off is that he saw these young kids getting
he
wanted his own, so he
forced it.
Yeah, it's just fucking terrible. Anyways, sorry.
I guess one.
And then the
thing about the film was more with that, and we talked about this earlier when those 4 younger kids are in the bathroom. You can just see that how this is just very cyclical, because in a way they're just raised and exposed to the bad behavior of the older kids.
Yeah,
and they're likely to repeat.
And then Casper has the last line where like, "What the heck happened?" And I'm like, "Okay, dude."
The one positive thing I will say about this film is that it inspired Mac Miller's freshman mixtape, which is a classic to me. That was one of my favorite mixtapes when I was at an undergrad. So it was very nostalgic. I had no idea.
I had no idea he even died. But
Mac Miller?
Yeah, but okay.
He died in 2018. That was huge news.
That shows you how much I follow the music industry. But I do follow Sabrina Carpenter, who's a rising star. Anyways,
honestly, you should listen to his album.
Which one?
With the context of this film, you might find it interesting.
Okay, he only has one album. I thought he had more.
No, that album, the Kids specifically.
So
Mac Miller has like 12 projects.
I was gonna say, I thought like a bunch. I was like, well, this album, okay, this specific one. Okay, I was like, I was shocked. That's why you saw my face. I was like, wait, I thought he had more music than that.
Tons, dude.
But to what you're alluding to is something that I think. Look, we'll get into the ratings, but like it's interesting how like I think for some people this movie's like this defined my the question I just asked you is like it defined my youth. Like this, my coworker, I mean, he genuinely believed it. Like,
I could not relate to this movie in the slightest.
yeah, and so like that's the thing. Like it's gonna impact our ratings because again, my coworker will probably be like, "Yeah, that movie's like 9 out of 10." Well, I won't go into ratings right now, but I find it interesting how like this film can really resonate with people, and like they'll use words like, "Oh, this was like my childhood," especially if they grew up in New York in that kind of culture in the the 90s. I'm with you. Like for me, like there's things like I think the film was trying to do. I understood it. Great.
Honestly, mid '90s, I related more to it being outdoors, not necessarily the skate culture, but that kind of like hanging together. Like I don't know, like a lot of our youth was really,
yeah, the local
especially
park.
in high school, was like pickup after the park.
Yeah, local park. Like you said, like they're growing up in. I will say this:
but it's also like it's a difference in terms of the setting because we didn't grow up in a dense urban. It was more suburban.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. I was gonna say I agree. Like that was the one thing I liked about the film, but because this coworker gave me the recommendation, or ex-coworker gave me the recommendation, is that I got a better sense of what it must have been like to grow up in this urban environment. Because I actually asked native New Yorkers this, because to me it's wild. Like I see kids when I go to work, I see kids on the subway by themselves. Yeah.
Remember we went up to Harlem and all the school kids were out? Like they were about to go to the subway, and I was like, this is weird, man.
Yeah, like I'm like, it's like a totally different way of growing up. And like and I'm with you. It's like that's why I also can't fully relate, because I didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up in an urban jungle where I'm going to the subway or I'm
there's no city. Well, it's maybe if you grew up in the heart of San Francisco, that's like the closest thing I can think of. But there's not. New York is its own thing.
Yeah, and it's like when I go out and play like rec sports, and I see kids are like going to like, because we often play at high school gyms.
Yeah,
I mean their gym is like where I play like my basketball league. The gym's at the 9th floor. I'm like, I never played basketball growing up. I was always like outside, like ground level, like 9th floor, or we're going underground, or we're like, or there's people who play on the rooftops of New York tennis. I'm like, what is this?
I should different.
Yeah, it's like, what is this, dude? High schoolers like hanging out in the corner, like, oh, our hangout spot is this bodega down here. I'm like, what? I used to drive around. Like nobody drives. No kid actually learns how to drive in New York.
I actually like something that came to mind that I don't know why I didn't watch. This show had elements of Shameless in it.
Yeah, I did. I've only seen one season of Shameless, but yeah, it does a little bit. Well, it's because I do think that this film inspired a lot of creators. I wouldn't be surprised if the Shameless guy got some inspiration stylistically from.
Well, no, where Shameless is Shameless is originally a British show.
Oh, it was remade. Interesting.
Yeah, it was remade for. You might find this interesting, having been to Europe, but it's actually the original show is a blue collar family in Manchester.
Oh, Manchester.
Yeah. So you can probably imagine that, because Manchester is very kind of industrious, blue collar kind of town.
That reminds me of when we did I, Daniel Blake with the set of Newcastle, dude. That's a good one, dude. When they had the whole
yes, I remember that. That was a tragic film, very tragic.
This was also
much like this. It was also incredible.
This was tragic. Yeah, this was tragic. That was tragic too, but that was you empathize with the main character.
Yeah.
This one, like in the end, like, oh, Casper. I empathize with the girls,
with the females,
but the guys. I was like, you should be like in jail, dude. Like, I like, come on, you guys need like to be put away for a little bit to get some help.
A little bit. No, they need like they're. I mean, they're doomed, man. Those kids were doomed.
That was the sad takeaway, is that they just never had a chance, really. So it's like,
yeah.
But I think we should get into ratings. But yeah, I just wanted to, talk about like that part. So I would say let's get to final ratings and reviews. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is a film that's very jarring at times, made me incredibly uncomfortable. It is interesting that it was kind of a cult classic and did inspire a lot of. It launched the careers of a lot of actors and actresses, and it also like inspired different other art forms, like I was saying, like Mac Miller's project, which is kind of interesting. Just that take of how influential this film kind of was in many ways. I will say, I just think that we talked about this, that it wasn't necessary like how they covered certain aspects. Like they could have left things kind of unsaid in a way, and it still would have been impactful. And on top of that, I did find it kind of slow at times. I was like, all right, this is kind of unnecessary. Yeah, like I got kind of bored with some of the hedonistic kind of aspects, or when like they're at the house party, I started to kind of lose interest. Yeah, and for a lot of those reasons, I had to give this film a 6 out of 10.
I think that's fair. 6 is kind of low. I came in at 7, but I'll explain. But basically, I agree with most of the spot. Like maybe because we watched so many films now that like I kind of like analyzed like what you could have done. So like that ending scene where if he's banging the whatever the young Latina, he could have easily had the door closed and just had like excessive sound effects. Like I don't know why he has to.
You didn't even need any of that. Like
Yeah.
you could have just shut the door, like had him look out, shut the door, and then that's it.
Yeah, like, but I'm just saying, if you want to be provocative, you could have just had that, like, pornographic, sound effects. I like, there's things that he really wanted to focus on the visuals. I could tell by the time I got to the end of the film, I was like, okay, dude, like, I get it, but like, you could have just had your first scene. A movie that I think is kind of similar with a heavy topic, which I don't know if we'll get to because I have a big backlog, is like Pieces of a Woman. I saw that one, and it's like one of the few films I saw like a childbirth where the kid died. Spoiler alert. And like, but that's like the only heavy scene, right? Everything else is about the trauma and like the character stuff. Shia LaBeouf is in it, really good. But like here, like he had his open. It's called Pieces of a Woman, the movie. It's on deep in my backlog because I have other higher priority films. But what I'm comparing is because that film has a like similar to Kids, right? In your face. First scene's like, what the heck am I watching, right? Like, with Kids, he's getting with that 12-year-old. But he keeps going back to the well. And remember how we always talk about like you shouldn't always just go back to the well. He does that too often. So I was definitely never going to go higher than like a 7. And I just
when, that was like when we watched Possessor, and you're like it was good, and he's like it just got so ridiculous or repeated with like how much gore was in like a lot of those scenes, and you're like it just made me laugh. You're like it lost effect.
Yeah, it's like you want that cherry on top, but if the whole movie's cherries, it loses its effect after the third cherry. Like you don't want more cherries. Yeah,
it just, I don't know, the movie made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, luckily I've seen it twice. I
would never watch it again. Never.
Well, I had to watch it because it's been so long. I was like, I only watched it in the pandemic, and I was like, well, did I miss something? And then I was like, no, I didn't miss anything. Yeah. But I learned to appreciate mid-90s New York. Anyways, but
really, I didn't. Actually, like Gomorrah should have been burned to the ground.
Okay, that's excessive. Anyways, but yeah, I came in as a 7 because I think the film is watchable to a degree, and then I also think that there's enough in it if you're not exposed to those kind of movies or you don't watch a lot of indie films, like you could probably gain some value. I don't think the rewatchability is high. I do think that's important always in a film. I also
not even close.
And I do think like this film, I think what really hurts it is you can still do the same story and even have the same opening scene, but you don't have to double down on it. I think if you double down a little bit less, and he might disagree, the director and the writer, but I say as a viewer that you could maybe have done a little bit less. You could have had the same effect. You could have kept the opening scene. This is the compromise I'm doing. You could have kept the freaking really in your face opening scene, but you could have like had a different way of showing the ending. Because the ending was just, to me, like, when like a director just wants to go like over the top, like Michael Bay. Like Michael Bay does this with explosions. Here's the perfect analogy. Michael Bay does this with explosions, what this guy did with the underage sex. He wanted to show all his cards on the table because it was probably the one time he was going to get away with it, and boom, he did that. And Michael Bay does it with all his movies too. Like he loves to have the biggest explosion at the end, and this guy just chose to use underage sex with that. So I will say that like that's why I really do dig the film, but I don't think the film is poor enough for me to go lower than 7. I think it's an indie film. It took risks. Some risks paid off, some didn't. I think more often than not, it didn't pay off, and that's kind of like where I'm at. 7 out of 10.
Fair enough.
Anyways, thanks for listening for this controversy. Our first NC-17 film. Kids,
Hopefully,
1995. Probably because I don't have many in my backlog around this. But please like and subscribe. We're looking to always push the boundaries of this pod. But unfortunately, my next two picks, my next two picks are gonna be not. They're gonna be because I know my co-host doesn't have the appetite like I do, so he's gonna get a little breather from me. The next two picks I have, so which will be Straight Outta Compton and When Harry Met Sally. So totally different vibes.
Yeah, how do you go from kids to those two? I mean, that's crazy.
Just to give you a break. I had more. I had more hard ones.
A subscriber or two from Straight Outta Compton. A little more mainstream we're going.
Yeah, a little bit. That's a great film too, but
I've never seen that.
But it's well, I say great as in like I liked it. I wouldn't say it's like my top 10, but
yeah.
But a little breather, like you said, a little breather for you, because I know that if I kept with the hard-hitting ones, you're gonna go insane.
No, I was kidding. This is just like this is ridiculous.
Yeah, wait until I go deep in my backlog for darker films. I'll say that. I'll hint that.
I don't know, dude. I can stomach a lot. This is just too much.
Yeah, wait until I pick
that ending the back to back. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, this is like ridiculous.
I knew you would say that. I was like, when you fast forward, I was like, Alexa, 100% fast forward this, dude. There's no way.
Of course I did. What insane person wouldn't?
Bro, you gotta have that on repeat.
No, fast forward. No, I'm done with that.
Oh,
that's crazy, dude.
I personally hated that rape scene. I was just like, oh man, like how are we doing this, bro? Like how are you doing this to me, dude? You're like, it's like
any no, I can't do it.
Yeah, you know what the analogy I use for that scene is that like the director was like, oh, I see this drug addict. I already gave him drugs. I'm gonna give him now like super dose. Like okay, dude, but you just want to kill us. Dude.
What I will say that we didn't touch upon, it is, and I guess that's something that that's when it really hit me with Train Spotting. Was just their scenes at the rave. I was like, these are the most like 90s rave scenes I've ever seen in both films. So that's what made me know that could actually do.
That's true. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think next week we're doing your well, I don't know about next week. My schedule might be packed, but yeah. I know the next pick is yours, and it's gonna be that iconic controversial. I don't think it's that controversial, but it got a lot of critiques to
which film?
Aren't you picking the one with the one that's set in like Ireland?
Yes.
The Banshee something, yeah.
Banshees of Inisherin.
Yeah, I've seen that once. It's an interesting film. It'll be interesting.
I think it's a lot to talk about. There's also, I mean, it's a little tough with some of the scenes there.
Not as tough as this one, man.
No, come on, bro. Like this is
you're like, this is ridiculous.
it was so over the top, so unnecessary.
Hey, dude.
I get some of it, but I was just like, dude, like.
The only thing this film was missing was one character randomly banging a dog, dude. It's like you might as well just gone full throttle, dude.
Well, dude, it was just like, what are we doing, dude? The language, like from the start, it was bad. From the like, they just like, let's just sucker punch you into this storyline of awful people.
Yeah, exactly, dude. It's kids, dude. These are just kids, though. So,
kids. Anyway, well, that's it for this week's episode. Stay tuned for Banshees on our next.